Hi, my name is Colin Fain. I'm the CEO of Agronometrics. And in this video, I want to take you on a tour of Spain's production. They have their season upcoming. And our team just put together an article for the IBO about Huelva strategy going forward. So there's some interesting insights from that I'd like to share. Look at the data that we have available in the Global Trade Data Service, and then kind of bring this into context and what's expected for the coming season. So let's dive right in. This is right on the heels of Fruit Logistica. So I haven't done a video, didn't do a video last week, and happy to kind of be back at it this year, this week. Starting off with the article that we put together, it's an interesting kind of summary of the content that's in the International Blueberry Organization State of the Blueberry Industry Report. If you're a client of the Global Trade Data Service, I'm kind of pretty sure that you know what this article is. It's one of the biggest publications that we as Agronometrics produce in partnership with the International Blueberry Organization. And so to put together this narrative, we took some charts straight from the publication and put them here. Here we can see the hectares planted in Spain. Not all of this is Huelva. There's been growing production from other regions in the country. But I think one thing that does stand out, that is generally true of Huelva as well, is that the production or the producing area is kind of stabilizing. So you can see there was this big peak or this big kind of growth phase that took us through 2017. And then in 2018, we started seeing the proportion of hectares not in production start decreasing. And now it's kind of stabilized. There's still growth. And even Huelva also mentions that there's still growth. They grew by 0.5% in plantings in 2023. And I think one interesting thing about this article is it states ambitions for sustainable blueberry growth. One of the main issues in Spanish agriculture in general, not just Huelva, has been water usage. So on February 1st, the participants of Fresh Huelva, which kind of looks at all berry productions in the Huelva region, went and had a demonstration in Sevilla to try to argue for better hydraulic infrastructure. And so we're gonna look at a couple maps and kind of dive into this in a little bit more detail. So Huelva is a very particular region within Spain. These are all the water basins that Wikipedia made a really nice map. I was actually really happy to have found this. But we can see the Tinto, Odiel, and Piedras region. This is where Huelva sits. It's right at where the Tinto and Odiel come together. So kind of like, if you want to compare it to like California, this is one of the smallest water basins in all of the peninsula. And this gives Huelva a lot of control over this water. So that makes it very suited to agriculture. Again, maybe not too far off from California. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. When there's a lot of water to be had, you have complete control over it. You don't need to negotiate with anybody else downstream. That water does not need to be spread out over a huge landmass. Any water that isn't used drains into the Atlantic. And but then when there's not water, that does become an issue. And we started seeing news reports that came out. So this is from Diario de Huelva. And it's saying that the government is, or the Commission for the Management of Drought for the water basin is putting watering restrictions for the region. And this is a pretty big deal for our industry. Obviously, these are strawberries highlighted. Blueberries actually use less water than strawberries in production. So, from like an environmental standpoint, and especially for a water use standpoint, there's a bit of a victory story that blueberries can tell at the very least in this regard. But if we look at the data, which this was a really interesting website to find, it's embalses.net, and it covers all the reservoirs and reservoir levels throughout Spain. So you go to the Tinto, Odiel y Piedras, and you look at all of the reservoir levels within that region. And we can see in 2023, when that news article was printed in October specifically, we saw that the water levels at in the reservoirs was at a very, very, very low point, and that's kind of what spurred the restrictions in irrigation. Um, Restrictions in irrigation at this point are not a great thing for our industry, given that plants need water to produce fruit. And this, in line with a couple years of historic trends per se, of different water issues or climate issues, we've seen this restrict production in the Spanish region. For 2024, I'm kind of going into the year with very, very low water levels. We're already seeing a big spike in water within the reservoirs. So spring so far has looked pretty good. We're already above the 2022 levels. Of course, we can all hope that water levels continue to increase, and this creates a sustainable environment within which the production of fresh produce can kind of flourish. But this region and like kind of the variance between these lines is why Fresh Huelva is making noise to kind of build up the water infrastructure within their region and to make a more sustainable ecosystem for their agricultural production going forward. I wanted to kind of complement the information that we published in the IBO with the IBO by going into the IBO report. This is the 2023 IBO report, and this is the information that we make available for Spain. So the idea of these monthly publications, this time it was Spain's turn, is to kind of drive traffic back to this report. And there's a lot of really interesting information to be had. So here we can see fresh and processed. Most everything that Spain produces goes to fresh. We have a good stab at calculating the yields, which is kind of maintained at around 16,000 kilograms per hectare, which is actually like one of the more efficient producing regions in the world. We also complement this with the export data, looking at the top export destinations. You get to see what the exports actually look like, as well as the monthly distribution of said exports. And then that's complemented with the imports. In this case, most of the imports are from Morocco, which are then re-exported through Spain to the rest of the European Union. I wanted to take this information. So not then there's also like a big narrative and a piece by Fresh Huelva. If you want to know more about Spanish production, I definitely encourage everybody to come through and take a look at this. If you're interested in advertising in the IBO report this year, the IBO just gave us the honor of being able to take responsibility for that in the 2024 publication. So we definitely thank Planasa for being a part of this report and look forward to you guys being a part of the 2024 report. Our salespeople will reach out. Don't you worry about that. So yeah, then there's an entire team narrative from Spain. By all means, reach in. There's a lot of work and a lot of research that's gone into creating this content to kind of tell the story of Spain and how it's going forward. If we dive into the global trade data, we get not only all the export and import data that we saw in the IBO report, but all this data is up to date. So we already pretty much have a good idea of what the 2023 numbers look like. And anybody who's either seen these videos or has access to the report is obviously going to be familiar with the format of this information. We have the last 18 months, exports by destination. And then we've got the last 10 years, exports by destination, as well as an overlay of what the monthly exports look like compared to the previous couple of years. And I think this chart is pretty interesting. Obviously, last year was a tough year. I mean, water issues in mind and all that. I think it's also particularly interesting from a commercial standpoint, at the very least, seeing the strategy that Spain has taken within which to kind of either continue to grow or distribute their production within the possible destination countries that they work with. We'll dive into that in a little bit more detail. Of course, we cover the volumes. We also cover the prices. Last 18 months, when there's very little volume, these kind of get mixed up. But what we can see is 2023 saw a big increase in prices. So we can isolate the 2023-2022 data and look at the height of Spain's production window, which is March, April, May, and we see almost $1 increase on prices, if not a bit more. So this is like, yeah, they had issues with production. Water was an issue. The volumes were lower than previous years, at least for as far as exports are concerned. That said, when we come down to the last section and we look at value was almost exactly where it was last year. So all things said and done, although there wasn't as much fruit produced, the market paid a good price for that. And that allowed the value of the production to remain stable, meaning that the amount of dollars that ultimately went back to the producers was in line with what they earned previous years, which is not the worst situation. If this goes down a lot, then you start having people that have financial difficulties. They'll have a hard time replanting, modernizing their production to be able to better manage the complexities of the market going forward. But I thought that was a pretty interesting takeaway that we have available in the global trade data system, and some insights that you can kind of use to better understand not only how the production fared, but what the ultimate financial result for producers might have been. As I mentioned before, I thought it was interesting also to look at the strategy that Spain is using to distribute their production, especially when they have less production. So what we can see here is Germany is seeing a decrease. Spain in 2023 shipped a slightly higher volume than what was sent in 2018. So that's a big mix in or redistribution of their production, if you will. All the other producing regions, I mean, the United Kingdom's kind of stayed the same, Italy's kind of stayed the same, Poland's kind of stayed the same. The biggest growth comes from others. So how can we go look at others? So the way we do that is we click on the chart link, and I kind of already did that. So here's the chart. And the way we have this set up is you can kind of by default build the chart that you want. We have this set up to have the top 5 producers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. and everything else is lumped into others. But you can customize that. So you go to showing, and you can do 10, you can do all, which is like hundreds. That's quite a bit. And this is the reason that we have the top 5 is because when we started working with the global trade data, there was just too many on there, and you just had these massive legends with just lists of countries, and everything was very confused and hard to kind of get a hold of. But we're going to look at the top 15 and see what insights we can kind of draw from it. So we go to custom, and I've already done that. And you can kind of turn on and off the different filters, and I've already done that as well. Because obviously, like, I wanted to kind of get an idea of what the narrative was going to be for this before I actually told it to you guys. And part of that was looking at, for example, Germany, which is the exact same line that we looked at in the last chart, and how that compares to others, which now we're looking at the top 15. So others is much smaller. So we're going to click all of the other ones off, and that gives us a zoom into that small percentage. And we can look at the areas that or the countries that are growing. And I think it's pretty interesting. So, and there's nothing definitive that I'm able to like kind of call from this information. But this is just my observation as I was kind of playing with the data, getting ready for this video. So France is growing, and they're right next to Spain. They've traditionally produced for their own consumption, but France imports into France haven't been particularly noteworthy. Um, they're not huge. We're looking at what's this, 2,500 metric tons. So that's not a massive number, but it is growing, and I think that's interesting and of noteworthy. We're seeing, for example, Belgium as well as the Netherlands decrease. Um, Austria, which is the next largest, is increasing. So that's an interesting market. Usually, Austria is served by Germany, which re-exports their imports that were re-exported by the Netherlands. So the fruit usually goes into the Netherlands, especially countercyclical southern hemisphere fruit. From there, it gets shipped to Germany, and most all of the German re-exports then go feed into Austria. That's some of German's own production, as well as the counter-seasonal southern fruit that they got from the Netherlands that then makes it to Austria. But it looks like Austria is becoming a more interesting market for the Spanish. And then there's a bunch of little guys down here, usually like under 1,000 metric tons. But it's interesting that where we're seeing the most growth is Romania, Hungary, and Slovakia. So there's a conceded effort to increase the exports into Eastern Europe from Spain. I, again, don't have much more depth to offer other than looking at this data and kind of drawing the conclusions that it has to offer. But I thought that was an interesting point, and seeing this kind of new market open up, and the opportunities that Eastern Europe as new consumers of this product and producing countries of blueberries is becoming a more and more attractive market. Maybe not to say at the expense of Germany, because Germany is still importing huge volumes compared to what's going to Eastern Europe. But that's where we're seeing growth. Where in other regions we're seeing less growth, if not kind of retraction, maybe to a more stable commercial situation. And I wanted to close out this video by talking about what Spain is expecting going forward. And so, asking several sources within the country, kind of the ear to the ground feel is that the 2024 production will be similar to the 2023 production. So I think that's an interesting perspective to bring to this information, especially as we look at what production has looked like in the past, where we were at in 2023, and then how this will be distributed within the market going forward. So that's this video, and hopefully you found this information interesting. We'll see you in the next one.